George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation. We are in the remix, and we've got a great chef. Bryant Terry is the author of Afro Vegan, Farm Fresh African, Caribbean, and Southern Flavors Remixed, and he's got 100 wholly new creative culinary combinations that will amaze vegans, vegetarians, and omnivores alike. Well, this is a conversation that's in the remix, bringing you the best of inspiration for the nation. So, I know a lot of people are thinking about plant-based diets. Well, here's Bryant Terry to talk about how to do it with a little soul. And this is a great opportunity for those of us who love food and who are looking for new and interesting ways to enjoy our food. We welcome Bryant Terry to the program.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great and so glad to have you on the program to talk about your book, Afro Vegan. And this is important for me because I'm married to a vegetarian, but I'm a meat eater, right? So we're always struggling.
You're in a mixed relationship. You're a mixed couple.
Yes, yeah. And I understand that you started out on the right path, but your wife, you said that after you had your child, it all changed up on her.
Yeah, I joke around and say that she turned into a cave woman, but really it was her deciding to eat what felt good for her at that moment. She felt like she wanted to have more chicken. She was actually anemic, and so her iron was low. So in addition to doing lots of iron-rich foods and this Floradex iron supplement that she takes, she decided that she wanted to have beef occasionally. And so, I always say that it's really about one of the most important things that people should do when thinking about what they're consuming for better health and well-being is listen to their bodies. And, it's vitally important that we all eat more fruits and vegetables and whole, legumes and seeds and nuts and just real food, whole foods. But I think the rigidity that I often see people having around what they might argue is the best diet or the perfect diet, whether it's a raw food diet or a vegan diet or a paleo or a vegetarian or whatever it is, I think people can, get tripped up when they just kind of choose the whatever they imagine the best diet is and follow the script accordingly without really checking in and listening to their bodies.
What I love about what you're doing here, Bryant, is that you're offering us, first of all, you are a vegan, so that's one thing. But and I loved how you said that we're in a mixed couple relationship in terms of food. And the challenge of that is whenever we go out, people think if they throw some bland vegetables or maybe a half-baked salad or they throw some pasta something, or if they go that far, oftentimes she's left out. She can't really find anything, and especially in our cultural tradition. We're the worst at it. We're getting better, Brian, but in many ways we're the worst at it. We just can't give up some of the things that we're used to culturally. So I that's one of the reasons why I was so happy. In fact, I gave her a copy of the book because it will allow us to not only be more inventive in our own kitchen, but also find different ways to make some of the things we already enjoy taste even better.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up this thing around culture because I like to make a distinction between what's habit and what is actually culture. And I think some of those habits do kind of evolve into these cultural norms. But part of my work is really helping African Americans remember, kind of piece back this history, which, just a couple of generations ago, we think about so many of us who had roots in the southern United States, folks who have agrarian roots, families who, lived on farms, or had urban gardens or community gardens or home gardens, and really helping us remember that before our food system was industrialized, so many of us were connected to eating real food, growing food in our home. And when we even think about the kind of foundational foods of African American cuisine, it's rooted in, just nutrient-rich, really helpful foods like, leafy greens such as collards and mustards and turnips and kale and dandelion and things like butter beans and sugar snap peas and pole beans and black-eyed peas. Like, these are healthful foods. And so I don't really think it's so much about me kind of reinventing or I should say, introducing something new. I think it's about helping people remember that these are the traditions, and we need to kind of reach back and move beyond just the comfort foods of the cuisine. Because so often when people talk about soul food, they're really describing and what they imagine as, African American cuisine as a whole, but they're talking about one, small sliver of it, just
That's
the comfort foods, the foods that people eat on holidays and celebrations. But I want people to move beyond that and know about the diversity and complexity of African American cuisine.
Talking to Bryant Terry, he's the author of Afro Vegan, Farm Fresh, African, Caribbean, and Southern Flavors Remixed. That's how I call it.
Yeah.
Remixed. and I love the fact that you said remixed. Now, I got to share with you that my wife is she's got the green thumb in the family. And a few years ago, we have a church, and I give it up to this church that's in our community. They basically take their lawn, if you will, and they turn it into a community garden. They ask you to pay a small nominal fee. They provide you with the water, and you got the ground. And we could do it at our house as well, but we also enjoy working with, I should say she enjoys, make it very clear that she's the one doing it. But you spoke of this agrarian tradition. She grew up in, a regular city neighborhood, but her father was a gardener, and he had a garden outside in the house. And so we had a garden at our house as well, but we found that the critters were always coming through, and we got tired of that. So we just do maybe some tomatoes. But there's nothing like, Bryant, your own eggplant or your own tomatoes or your own collards. I mean, the last 2 seasons, we have enjoyed our own collards from our own garden. And I know for some people, depending upon where they're hearing the show, big deal, George. What are you saying? We grow collards all the time. But I'm telling you, Bryant, there is something that is extra special about knowing that we just went I remember one Thanksgiving, Bryant, we went right to the garden the day we were allowed to let the greens stay actually till the morning of Thanksgiving, went and picked those greens and had I would say one of the best Thanksgivings ever with those comfort foods and all the other things that go along with it. So there's something that's deeper than just the idea of growing your own food. There's something about it. It's almost as if I can't describe it.
Yeah, well, it's nothing more satisfying and economically sustainable than being able to walk right outside your house and harvest your own food. It's just like you get to, actually taste something that you had a part in growing. You don't have to go to a store and spend your money. You just, make the initial investment in the seeds or the starts, and then let Mother Nature do the rest. And one thing that I often remind people is that when you eat food that's locally grown and that's harvested, that day at the, when you go to the farmer's market or your community supported agriculture program, or if you go to the community garden. But like you said, if you're growing it at home, you can harvest it as soon as right before you cook it. And so once you harvest foods, not only does it lose nutrients, there are studies that show that as soon as you harvest, food from, vegetables from the ground, for example, it starts to immediately lose nutrient content. And when you consider that most food that people eat across the United States is actually shipped in from California, then people are getting food that's been in, refrigerated trucks for week on end, sometimes in, sitting in a store for a long time. And so it's almost like, it's just like the raw roughage is there, but, it's just not as nutrient rich as it should be. And given that the soil has been depleted of a lot of nutrients, that's a whole other conversation. But the other thing is, it's so much more flavorful when you get it when it's recently harvested. And like you said, this is almost like the indescribable thing. You just like, this is just so, it's like the vibration is good, the flavor is good. And so that, for me, I like to appeal to people's self-interest, because I live and breathe this work, and I don't care how sustainable, how ethical, how healthful the food is. If it isn't flavorful, I don't want it. And I know the average eater feels the same way. So I just say, if for no other reason, grow your own food at home, support your local farmer at the farmer's market, or join a CSA program, or get your church to start a community garden, because the food's going to be so much more flavorful than anything you can get at a supermarket.
And there's certain things you can do. Like people say, well, I live in the city. You can do small container gardening. You know what? We've got the recycle bins, and we take the recycle bins, and we've done some peppers in the recycle bins. We've done some other kinds of I think we did okra in a recycle bin, and so you can do small container gardening. People are thinking it's more difficult because they may have small spaces. Bryant, you're from the 510 represent Oaktown, Oakland, California. So you know that people may have smaller spaces if they're living in larger urban areas, but you can do it anywhere you are.
Yes, I agree. I mean, I always say, or a friend of mine always talks about any part that we play in growing food is contributing to healing the earth. And I think, if you're living in the city, if you're living in New York City and you just have a fire escape, you can grow tomatoes in a pot on
That's
your fire
right.
escape.
Talk to me, yes.
You can grow fresh herbs in your kitchen windowsill. All you need is a little light and watering it. And, in the case, we have my wife and I have a home in Oakland, and we actually we have a pretty sizable backyard, but there's one space that gets the most light. And so we built a 100-square-foot raised bed in our backyard in which we're growing a diversity of vegetables and fruits and herbs. But we did the same thing in our front yard, too, which was a different statement. There are a number of people in our neighborhoods who are growing food in their backyard, but we were just like, no, we want to come out the closet. We want to bring it to the front yard so people come by our house, and they're just mesmerized, and they love,
I love that.
Seeing people just growing their own food, and it inspires people.
Talk to me about, we're talking with Bryant. Bryant, I know I have a time limit, but work with me here, brother. Work with me.
I'm here. However much time you need, bro.
because I got a lot to say about this, because I'm really passionate about food, and I'm really passionate about the fact that you are really about taking this work and you talk about the remix. Bryant Terry, the author of Afro Vegan, remixing some of the flavors of the African diaspora, food that we grew up with, but we're looking at it in a different way, flavorful and such and so forth. And I want to go back to what you just said about putting your vegetables in the front yard as a way to sort of share in community. The idea of doing that, one of the things that I noticed about a community garden is that there's a sort of support for one another. And you get the kids out there and they're working the garden and they're working it, and you see the fruits of your labor, and then you start to develop sort of a kinship. And when your plot needs watering, they'll do it, and we'll share. And if I had the good eggplant harvest this year, then I'll share. You'll give me some of your kale. And the same thing in your front yard. You can start to build a movement of such. And you call this food justice in some ways, not what you're specifically doing, but the idea from you're passionate about what we call food justice, because oftentimes in the communities and inner cities in particular, when money's low, Brian, let's get to the real deal here. Mm-hmm. When money's low, it's a lot of starch, a lot of processed, because that's what I think I can afford. And I don't know how I can afford to be as creative and eat a plant-based diet. And you're not even pushing a plant-based diet. You're just saying that this is an option available to you, and if you do, you can have it in a flavorful way. So that there is a question in there somewhere, brother.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I think one of the things. So a lot of people who know me as a cookbook author aren't necessarily aware that my work actually started as a grassroots activist, working around issues, just what you described, really understanding that there are a number of physical, geographic, and economic barriers that so many people across this country have just to accessing healthy, fresh, affordable, and safe and culturally appropriate food. People there's this reality that so many people, communities across this country are suffering from some of the highest rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and a large contributing factor to that is what people are eating. And so the goal of people who are working to create food justice in these communities, which is the human right to healthy, safe, and affordable food, is to really help empower people living in the communities to take charge of bringing more, options for healthful food and ensuring that people can actually eat real food and not eat just like what Michael Pollan calls edibles, food-like substances, because that's what a lot of people are eating. They're eating stuff and it's filling them up, but it's not food. This is just just like, industrial food. This is laboratory food, and we need to eat real food to heal our bodies. And I think that it's important for people to understand that, there's this barrier that people have to thinking like, oh, well, it's too expensive to eat healthfully or it's too expensive to eat plant-based foods. But one, like you said, when we're growing food, that's just like a major expense that you cut out. And you can't grow, burgers and sodas. So it's like the food that people are growing is just by default the type of food that we should be eating every day. And so I think it has to move beyond the individual, and we really need to understand without community-wide support, we can't do this. And that's why I think we have to get the churches and other faith-based institutions involved. We need to get schools involved. We need to get, the workplaces involved. So it's going to take a community-wide effort to really create a sea change. And I think things are changing because the fact that your wife is gardening at your church is a huge step, because 12 years ago, I really wanted to work with a lot of churches around these issues, and they just didn't get it. And I think people are starting to get it in a different way now.
Bryant Terry, the author of Afro Vegan, a great starting point, especially for those of you who want to do plant-based, but with a touch of soul. Afro Vegan, the author, Bryant Terry. Inspiration for the Nation in the remix here on Power 620.